So welcome to this webinar called Startup Talks, Understanding the Potential of Your Idea with iMatrics. And as you can hear in the title, today we will talk to the ICT company iMatrics about idea verification and understanding where your idea or technology fits in and who your paying customers are. My name is Lina Helgesson. I am community manager at LEAD, and I will start off by telling you a bit about LEAD, who we are and what we do. And then I will invite iMatrics CRO Marie Ahlqvist to talk about their journey and how they found a profitable direction of their business. Because it hasn't been a straight journey, and it rarely is. And this is something that we really want to highlight in this webinar, that it requires a lot of testing and adjusting and understanding who your paying customers are. You might have the most amazing idea that you are ready to invest everything you've got into, but what if no one wants to buy it? A good product or service is not enough. You need to also ensure that there is a real business opportunity, a demand from players who are willing to pay for it. But now, a bit about LEAD and who we are for those of you who don't know us. LEAD is a business incubator, and then you might wonder, well, what is a business incubator? As a business incubator, we help companies grow faster and safer, basically accelerating the development of startups with high growth potential to become scalable growth companies. Now, how do we do that? Well, we provide idea owners and entrepreneurs a wide range of directed resources and services such as business coaching, network and business contact, support to attract financing, and much, much more. We have 2 offices and are situated in 2 cities in Östergötland, Linköping and Norrköping. And we are currently working with 35 companies distributed over the 2 locations from both industry and research. Now, before I ask Marie to join the stage, I just want to mention that you are welcome to ask questions in the Q&A as we go along, and I will try to raise them during the talk or afterwards. But now, as I mentioned, we have invited LEAD alumni iMatrics here today to talk about their incredible journey to get to where they are today. They are the definition of adjustment and adaptation, and they have changed their concept several times to find a profitable path. Its cloud-based auto-tagging solution is now helping publishers create high-quality metadata, with both international and national reputable media companies as its customers. So welcome, Marie. We are so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Can you please tell us a bit more about what iMatrics do?
Well, iMatrics, we work with publishers or news industry or media industry, whatever you're familiar with. But you could say that in recent years, this industry is going through a massive digitalization. And by going from print to digital, they kind of changed their arena where they have their customers. And the digital arena puts on different types of demands with their audience, which basically means that one of their biggest pains is that they now feel like they compete with everybody else online. So Google, Facebook, Twitter, well, you know, all the big ones. And this means that they too need really high quality analytical tools to help them provide their content to their audience in wherever their audience is to consume it. So what we at iMatrics do is we help them with text and data analytics, these types of tools to be one part in the successful digitalization.
Nice, interesting.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, auto tagging is one of the services.
Yeah. And who are you? How did your journey with iMatrics start?
Well, I am originally from Stockholm, moved to Linköping to study mathematics, but also kind of discovered the entrepreneurial side as I studied mathematics. So in an entrepreneurial course, I, through contacts, met our CEO, Berkan Savas, who's a researcher today. And he had this vision of making something very useful with tools that he had, and he's you could put him in the field of AI, and that's kind of where my journey with iMatrix started. But apart from that, I'm someone who really loves music and math and, well, sales, I say. That's my role today.
So what was your initial task in iMatrix after you met Berkan?
Well, when I met Berkan, I would say my initial task, I was brought in with the support of Leo Innovation, as they're called today, and Berkan was already a part of Lead. So I came in with this whole business verification type of mindset because, well, I mean, Berkan had the knowledge to do something really great, but where? Like a bunch of algorithms it's nowhere near a business model. It's what type of text should we analyze? Is it this or that? There is so many different aspects. And I happily said I have no experience, but I'm eager to learn.
Nice. And your startup journey hasn't exactly been a straight line. And as I said, it rarely is. But you've changed concepts of your application and technique a few times. Can you tell us a bit about that? Like, what was the initial idea and where did it come from? And
yeah, the initial idea, I think Berkan originally was out surfing the internet and I think he was going to buy a camera, and he realized there were so many reviews and there's so much information online. And he was a bit, surprised because he knew that there are techniques to help navigate this huge amount of information, but he couldn't really find that anyone had put them to use. So when I came in, we were focusing on forums, so online discussion boards and such. To kind of help find, in these really big discussion threads, what is the essence of what people are talking about, who are providing good information, and what are those people writing about. And on that also hate speech, because the technology that we kind of base ourselves on can be used for many different purposes. So that was the first idea that we spent, looking back, too much time investigating. Because the people who run the discussion boards, they don't really want to talk to outsiders. But it was from the hate speech that we moved on to the news industry, because they had discussion boards and they are a bit more, serious organizations who want to provide a good value to society. So we figured they would have a much bigger need, which in a sense they did. But it was for tagging instead of hate speech, because they simply shut down their discussion boards on the news articles. So that's kind of the short track. Parallel to these, we've had student teams and ourselves have investigated, 5-10 other different tracks. I think we usually say that we've had 7 business models before we have the one we have today.
Yeah. And how did it all change? Like, what was that grain of gold that changed everything, where you found your profitable path?
It was very unclear at that stage, but in the end we found a paying customer, and we, in a sense, refused to do any work before someone paid us to do it. So we ended up, we talked to the news industry about this hate speech, and one person, I'm not going to mention who, but I still remember him. He kind of almost arrogantly told me that, oh, come on, if you're this good at analyzing text, why don't you just fix our metadata and our tags? And I was curious, what do you mean by that? Is this even an issue? So we brought that question along to the next meeting and the meeting after that, and we realized that when we talked about hate speech on their sites, and we talked about metadata and auto tagging, the response was completely different. Like from politely saying, of course, this is a societal issue of hate speech online, and we take this seriously, to something that you could see that they were like sitting up and kind of facing us saying, could you guys actually solve this? And that was the first kind of indicator that, okay, so here is actually something.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And did you, at that point, like drop everything and knew that this was the direction, or did you keep testing other ideas?
I would say that we were willing to, but the thing is that when you speak to people about these new things, it's still not top of mind for them. So from the first dialogue to the first paying customer was still about 4 or 5 months in this, speaking with that customer. So of course, in the meantime, we didn't just sit and wait, because you don't know which of these tracks are going to pan out. But we were, for every new week, we were a little sad that, come on, guys, we know that you're interested. And they were.
Nice. So the serial entrepreneur Steve Blank, has this famous quote, "Get out of the building." Is this something that you can relate to in iMatrix?
I would say, yeah, very much so. And I would also say that it's probably all thanks to Lead that we got out as much as we did. As I told you, the core idea of what we do today didn't come from me or from Berkant or from anyone in our team. The core of the idea that we do today came from someone saying, okay, but if you guys are this good, can't you fix this problem that I have instead? So like this open talking about their problems, what type of impact do you get, that kind of dialogue opens up different types of problems. And we would never reach that hadn't we been speaking to more or less all of the news media in Sweden. We spoke to people who do survey analytics. We spoke to, I spent a week on discussion boards everywhere trying to get a hold of them. But it's, yeah, you need to speak to them.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Yeah. So we spoke a bit about like verification, but can you tell me a bit more about the verification process for you? Like, did you have a specific structure in this process and tools that you used, or what did the process look like?
Yeah, in hindsight, I would say I can describe it much more structured than I felt that it was. And it was structured in the sense that we were helped by Lead to know what the next step is. And now that all the pieces have put together, you can kind of see, look back at it and see a trend in a sense. But at that time, it felt like, who can I call next? Who can I speak to? What can I ask? But the structure that we did have was the business model canvas. It's kind of the way we describe our business model today. And we started very early filling this with hypotheses, like who are our potential customers? What value do we think that we provide them with? How do we believe that we will make money from this? And then we took parts of this, starting with the customers and trying to verify that the things that we thought were true were true. And by saying that we threw away 7 of these, I mean that we realized that we were completely on the wrong track and had to throw that out. So that was difficult. And it's kind of the circular process of put up everything you think you know, or hope that you know, or guess, and then just take a part of that, design a test for it, and do that test. And one of those tests is get out of the building and speak to customers. That's the best way of finding out who they are. And for that, there's this kind of 9 boxes that I love, which asks questions to kind of drill at that need, the core. And kind of if you're successful in that, which we were in one stage, when you ask the questions in the right way, the only question left is, okay, so if we can fix this, what will you pay us for it? Or will you pay us for it now? And we ended up at that situation with this particular customer. They basically said, yes, we will. And then we'd hold our first really sales meeting with a customer, kind of said yes at the end. So those kind of 9 boxes that Lead has, but yeah, they are really key. I don't know if there's a better name for them. So I call them that.
All right. So as an entrepreneur, you need to be ready to kill your darlings, because no matter how amazing and perfect your idea is to you, you need to make sure that you have a customer that is willing to pay for it. And like you said, you had to drop quite some ideas. But how does that feel when you have to drop those ideas? Well, how did it feel?
I think we should have learned dropping ideas earlier. And I think looking back, the reason we dropped ideas is because one of them took off, and that means that you focus solely on that. It's not really, for us, it wasn't, I don't think we were mature enough to make the decision to say, okay, this is out. They were all kind of on pause for whenever we have time to look more into that. So but what we needed kind of to do, because one of the foundations of iMatrix was to help people, like normal people like us sitting here, and not corporations, which is why this kind of discussion boards or information online for every person was the starting point. And dropping that is kind of a shift if you want to target towards businesses, or if you want to target towards helping individuals gain knowledge. It's kind of a big shift in focus. And that was, I'm not going to say that it was hard, but it's something that we still bear in mind. It's part of our vision still to get to that point, but we need to start somewhere. And the other ones where you realize, hate speech, everybody was kind of congratulating us, patting us on the back. Oh my God, this is so cool. Can you guys solve this? Can you make a huge difference in society? And it's going to be because of you, all of this kind of cred. But nobody was interested in paying for it, which was, the ego boost that you get when everybody's kind of cheering you on because you're doing something well, and kind of putting that to the side then feels a bit, off in some sense, where you had this track where you could really make a huge amount of difference for people. But then,
maybe later.
Absolutely. So that's, as I said, stuff like that is more part of our vision, but we still need to grow to a company who has the means to do that first.
Yeah, but you don't have any like recommendation of how to know when it's time to change direction, because for you guys it just came so naturally that you found this way, or do you have any advice there?
I think that it needs to be every person's or every team's decision. And I think you need to look at it and say, how much time have I spent? There's a definition of when feeling insane, when you try to do the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And we were getting to that point with the forum thing. We'd spent more than a year with the same thing, trying new people, trying new paths, and being maybe too hopeful. As soon as there was this micro step forward, everything was fine again. And we could push on for another 2 months. I don't know if someone else has a better answer, but I don't think that anyone could have said anything to me to have made that. I think I needed to learn. And actually, I find this still hard. We still use the same principle to verify new types of projects, new types of products that we try to do. And it's still very difficult to face the decision of saying, this one that we still spent time building, that someone actually bought, we are shutting this down.
You kill your darlings. That's what it is. Like, you've been working on it so hard.
And I think it was lucky for us that we found something else that we could make our darlings. No, but you can't be proud. You should have pride in that you've found something, but it depends on, you need to focus on what the customer needs, not what you want to deliver. That's the core of it.
And now you found a profitable application of your idea and technique. And you have several reputable names on your customer list, both nationally and internationally. Can you tell us a bit more about that, the customers?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was getting the foothold that we got in Sweden first was back then easier. We traveled around Sweden speaking to everybody during this verification. So most knew who we were by the time that we started getting customers. So I would say it wasn't quickly, but in my head it's quickly. We got quite a lot of the Swedish news organizations, which was good. And then the next kind of step to prove is that you can get someone international. And how do you even do that? I mean, our networks in Sweden, you could call someone to kind of get help. This is still tricky, but getting the first customers abroad was a true kind of testament that this is something that is a need elsewhere as well. And also it was a chance for us to prove that our text analytics technology is language independent at its core, like we say it is. And with the track record now, I think we can say that we have at least some data to support that, which is good. But it's super cool to sign your first agreement with someone abroad. It just keeps growing when when there's more customers.
Nice. And I read a bit about this Dutch news agency that you were working with, and I think
Yeah.
it's super cool if you want to just share a little bit about what you did there.
Well, the Dutch, it was our first international customer. It was one of the quickest early sales that we have gotten. A colleague of mine, Frederick, reached out to them over LinkedIn. He pinpointed the right person. He talked to that. We got a meeting and we secured a first kind of proof of concept type of project. And what they wanted to do is, well, news have been around for quite a long time. So news organizations have massive archives. You can imagine, I mean, in Sweden, we have organizations who are more than 200 years old. And they, of course, have archives of all of this. And this Dutch company wanted to kind of celebrate their 50th birthday, if you wish, by releasing parts of their archive. But to do that, they had to scan it and digitalize it, and then you need to make it searchable, and also you kind of need to tag it so that it's easy to navigate. You want to have that kind of coherent. If you're looking at music, you want to be able to follow that over 50 years. So we tagged over 2 million articles for them for these 50 years. And that was, yeah, it was super cool project. We learned more about Dutch and how the Dutch language works. Yeah, one of the things that we do is identify people in texts. And you could really notice a difference in how you type a person's name 50 years back, because you start maybe only with the last name, for instance. And today, normally in news articles, you will always see the first and the last name, and then you refer to it. So we needed to kind of adapt some algorithms to kind of identify, work with how they write, which was, and we've learned that every language has a few of these unique, especially for names, how you deal with names.
And now, while we're talking about it, the industry itself, because like the media industry can be seen as quite a traditional industry. Is this something that you've struggled with, getting into that industry?
Far less than I felt like we should. They are, of course, they have a big legacy. I mean, as I said, not many companies carry these 200-year histories, and print has been a certain way for a certain number of years. And of course, there's a legacy there, but they see and they change with the societies, and they have, all news organizations have this really strong stand for democracy, which means that if they want to support the democracy, they need to be where the people are, basically. So from that aspect, we are kind of meeting a positive thing, that they are looking for the right change, but they're a bit cautious because they have invested heavily in, let's say, a lot of wrong solutions. And of course, that makes you careful as well.
Yeah.
So I would say it's more dependent on the people rather than the industry. It's very, very open, and they're very friendly, and they share surprisingly a lot with someone. When you ask the questions, they will tell you a lot.
Nice. I just want to quickly mention that if you have any questions, feel free to write in the Q&A as we go along. But now, I'm a bit curious about the team, because you started off with just you and Berkan, and now you have a team of 10 full-time employees. So can you tell us a bit about that journey? What competencies and skills did you expand the team, and what did it look like?
Yeah, and this is, of course, a difficult question, because there's been, at the beginning, when Berkan founded the company, he did that with a partner who's not with iMatrics anymore. And by the time I started, pretty short after, we were actually 5 people working with iMatrics. So there are a lot of people sadly left out when I tell the story like that. But when we got our first customer, we had already before been a part, I should say, of several student projects. So we'd met a lot of students. We hand in these, we frequently are a partner in different courses. And thus we meet a lot of students. And two of those students were John and Christopher, who later came to us and asked to do their thesis work with iMatrix because they were interested in this building something for large scale analytics and be able to build a system that can support this. And Berkan, being a mathematician, he can write the algorithms, but he can't write the IT infrastructure. But John and Christopher could. So before their thesis work ended with us, we have kind of stolen them into this first customer project because, well, we needed help to deliver, and that was crucial. So I developed quite a good skill for sales in the beginning, and John and Christopher could really build this system, and we could all talk to customers, which was great. And the first kind of we did a proof of concept with the customer, and then they kind of told us that, okay, can you prove that you can make a service out of this? So rather than just having something to show on the computer, can you make a service? We got a month to do that, and if we didn't deliver on time, they didn't have to pay us. We delivered on time, and we were apparently the first IT partner they had that did this. So that was something. But I mean, from that, we learned a lot, and I think you need to be open to learn new things. I'm really not, I don't have the education for what I do today, but you need to learn. And the first thing that we realized is that we needed someone who's good at building relationships, someone who is more looking to connecting with people, to build a stronger sales part and a stronger marketing. And that's the first full-time person that we hired in Frederick, who then got the Dutch customer. And from that, we have grown. I mean, when you get more customers, the tech team needs to grow. So last year, we actually hired 5 people. So we have another for backend, we have a data scientist, we have a front-end developer, we have back-end developers, as I said, and we have a key account manager who helps us with project management and finance and customers. So it's one step at a time, but you kind of see where there's too much work. Or where you feel inadequate, where something should move faster and it just doesn't, then maybe you should have someone who is better at that.
Makes sense. We actually have a question here in the chat. Is it a lot of difference between different markets? That's the question.
Yes and no. I think at least I am pretty surprised when we speak a lot to Business Sweden, for instance, to help us understand the culture in different markets and such. So we use them also as a reference point for that. And though they are very often accurate in general, we have in some sense started to see that specifically the news industry is a bit different. They don't compete with each other in any big extent. So they do, they invite each other over, they share their technical setups, they talk about how their projects are going, they're extremely open. And in that, they're more similar. But then, of course, you have the cultural aspects on the side of that. So it is still very different, and it's very different how far, Sweden is pretty far along as a country and as a society in digitalization and utilizing digital means for things, whereas other countries, if you look maybe to the southern part of Europe, aren't that far along. So I think that's more the difference for news.
How many countries do you have customers in right now?
Let's see, I should know this. 6 countries. So wow. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Germany.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that is, what's your future, your vision of the future right now, in terms of goals or?
For to be quite boring for this year is to close the gap between our costs and our or it's not called income in English, but the money that goes in and the money that goes out. It's a big aspect of this year. And you said profitable before. Yeah, we have a good, strong and verified business model. But to drive that kind of growth, you are always taking on more costs than what your revenue is. So increasing our revenue is really a strong point. And in that, our monthly recurring revenue, because our services are subscriptions, we get this kind of baseline every month, that if we can have that really high, we get this flexibility in the company. So it sounds kind of boring, but that is actually a good. But if we look at in terms of markets, Finland is going to be something that we look at. We want to have a stronger foothold in the ones that we have. So we work a lot towards the German-speaking market at the moment. We have quite a big sales project towards that. But if we look up from that, I was going to say the whole world, but let's say the whole world who supports democratic values. It's where we want to go. And in that, the vision is to expand to other industries, and later on after that to expand to in some way with something help ordinary people as well.
Yeah, nice. We have another question here, quite a specific one, so I'm going to read this one out here. I would like to go back to the point of market research. If I have an idea, for example, an electric scooter, and want to conduct a proper market research to understand the customer needs and to see the potential of the idea, how do I do that, or get in touch with customers, or a tool to have this market research done?
I think I understand the question. We have never used any type of other business to do market research. When we did the forum aspect, we did a survey with students. I actually just recently threw that out. So we printed maybe 200 pieces of paper, and we just gave one to anyone we could find. Like literally, we just went out there. And of course, it was in Linköping, so it was very local, but it still gave us an idea of where. So that was the user side, just speaking. And I think scooters might be the same, that you have, people, but there's no shortage of people. If you walk outside the door, maybe not now so much, but trying to find, like, is it maybe it's not really young children or elderly people, or maybe it's people who are commuting to work, trying to kind of niche the market a little bit more than just anyone, anywhere, and putting up hypothesis that maybe it's this age group or this gender, or maybe this something else, people who live in this area. But for the business side, then, we actually bought lists of 300,000 forums online. And I went through that list, not the whole, but I did 1,000 forums a day. Wow. To just look at how many members they had, and if they had enough members, we tried to contact them. But that I ended up having a virus on my computer, because there's a lot of sketchy forums.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. Any means, but so if you're targeting individuals, I would just walk out and try to speak to them to see if you can get something. But if you're looking at partnerships, ask around, because people have a lot of networks. Use LinkedIn. It really is a good way. I feel like I'm not giving a proper answer, but I think I'm trying to illustrate that we tried different things, and it was quite tiresome walking around. Just, can you fill out my survey? Can you fill out my survey? Can you fill out my survey? We did a German survey that we spread through Facebook, that we had help translating. We did an English one that we spread through contacts all the way to Australia. Wow. Use Facebook, use your networks.
Nice. So looking forward now, do you see any particular challenges or opportunities for iMatrics in the future?
I think something that we are going to learn more and more about is how competition works. So how do we actively compete? Because we've started actually competing with companies in a different way than before. We had a Swedish competitor before that still exists, but no, not so much, I would say. But now I think that's a new thing, kind of formalized. How do you make market strategies based on where your competitors are at? Where are they at? What are they offering? Why are people choosing them? So in that sense, learning to understand and not focus so much on us and what we can provide, but what can we provide in relation to what others provide? What are their pricing models and such? And that is a challenge. I find that pretty difficult. But then, of course, anything that has to do with growth, we need more customers, we need more markets, more revenue, but we also need to keep up what our products are. So how do we sell in a new way with something like this? How do we do marketing in a new way? What is the next technical steps for our products? So it's kind of the same questions that we've always struggled with, but they grow and they kind of change aspects again.
And any particular opportunities that you see for the future of iMatrics?
Yeah, there's more and more interest in applying what we do in not just in the news industry and in the publishing industry, but in anyone who has any type of big archive. So if you look at the large corporations, their knowledge bases, they have a lot of documents. It's a common problem that they're not fully searchable, or that you can't really find what you're looking for, and then people end up creating the same thing again because they couldn't find it. So we can see that type of similar types of issues elsewhere, but it's I think the first part for us is to just focus on like what's the next country and how can we get there, because we also want to grow a business where we can have the auto tagging as our core, but we do so many other things with our analytics, so we can have other follow-up services for customers.
Yeah. All right, I have one final question here. So if you could give yourself an advice back then, and knowing what you know today, what would that be?
Oh, that's very difficult. I find advice kind of, because if you would have told me to keep going like we did, which is a good advice, like to keep pushing, trying to keep finding, but the thing is we also spend almost too much time. We should probably have quit before we did, because it was a long time of nothing, or meetings that didn't give anything. So in that sense, you have to kind of find how far can I push and how far is it reasonable to push. And that is also something. But I think that the thing that has helped me most is having a mentor, having some kind of coach who knows something about this, someone that you can bounce ideas off. And we still have that today. We have left Lead. We miss them dearly, but we still have people who are mentors for us, who help us in aspects, and they are really key to kind of turning that. So I think finding that type of support, not being alone, is probably the things that would be the most important if I would redo this.
Yeah, I can imagine you get very stuck to your idea and you keep going until someone else tells you like it's time to try something else.
Yeah, and then you run out of ideas. What can I do now? And you become frustrated. And I mean, when we had this period when we were kicked out of Lead or left Lead, depending on what kind you want to be. But we spent a year at Lead, and once we have learned how to do this verification process, because we didn't have a business model, we needed to leave Lead. And at that time, Berkant had an extra room in his apartment that we basically had as our office, and that was it for quite some time. And it's you lose the networks of other people, and you lose the support. And we told Lee that we had the ambition to come back, and they said, well, you can apply when you have come further, and then you will be welcome back. And we came back. We brought a customer along. We said, look at our new verified business model, our new idea. We have someone who's paying for this. We're just launching a service for them. And yeah, lead said, well, clearly you've learned your lesson and you know what to do. Welcome. So that's kind of that part was pretty long, shall I say.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right. Do we have any more questions? Just feel free to write in the Q&A if you have any questions. I'm just thinking, like, let's say you're sitting on this amazing idea, according to you, that you have thought of, you have potential, you're solving a problem for something. What would be the next step? Do you have any recommendations? What do you do?
If I had an idea today that I wanted to look at, or what we basically do today, we start a verification process where you, of course, you do some Google it, look around. You need to do this. A side note, but these kind of questions, I bring out the question form that we have that basically centers around what is the problem, what is the impact of the problem, and what is the solution. And you ask all of these to the customers before you say anything. And a tricky part in that is not telling them too much before you get a chance to answer the questions. So of course, do your Google research. Like, don't go in empty-handed, but just pick up the phone. Like in Sweden, I got so many meetings just picking up the phone and calling. And maybe I was lucky with the industry, but call, ask them, because they will define the problem probably differently than you. And if you then, if you can get them to describe what is the problem they experience, how much is it costing them or hurting them or whatever it is, and what is their ideal solution? Like, what do they, how would they make a solution if they could make the best one? If they are kind of describing a solution you can deliver, they've kind of sold it to you. Plus you get the understanding of what the problem actually is. Because I've realized that when I sketch out what the problem is, I'm always wrong. Like, I've never been right in any of these. I've done it several times, but I'm never correct. I never understand why they. I think it's good, and I think I see something, but I'm never correct in what the other part sees as the most benefits.
I can imagine you get stuck on your solution, but then, like you said, it's important going actually looking at the problem first. What is the problem that I want to solve?
Exactly.
Because it might not be the thing that you think it is.
Well, I don't know a day in the life of whom I'm speaking to. I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what their tasks are, what they should focus on, what they should deliver. If they have an angry boss or an upset colleague or something else that they need to, meet the demands of.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any other questions? I can ask them, what has been the most fun thing about your journey with iMatrics?
The most fun thing. There's so many milestones, from getting the first customer to the second to the third to hiring the first person to getting the first international customers to growing the team to now. I mean, we have a team that is really can provide a value. Everyone's comfortable with what they're doing, and everyone is pushing in the same direction. And just sometimes standing back and looking at that, it's very rewarding. And then I think noticing those things along, like in every step of the way, it helping me with the tough times, because I mean, there are, of course, it's not a
walk in the park.
It's not a work in the park, which is why I love it, but it's not a work in the park. It's
nice. All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions, so thank you so much, Marie, for the interview, for your amazing answers. And
thank you.
Thank you. And I hope to see everyone that was here today again on the 5th of May, because then we have another Startup Talks with the topic of how to become a successful entrepreneur. We have invited Martin Källström, a serial entrepreneur, who will talk about his entrepreneurial journey. So keep an eye on our event page on lead.se, and you will find all our events, as well as on our social medias, where we also share all the upcoming activities and events. So thank you so much for joining us today, and have a nice evening, everyone.